come on. Well, you can't be up there. You're going to knock it off. Come here. Come here. You're going to knock the camera off, aren't you? Yeah, you can sit there with me. We're a couple minutes early. Please stand by, everybody. I'm Spokane Steve, and this, of course, is Mookie. Just look at him. Look at this cat. What's the date today? 22nd? About 7.5 months old, this little guy. Not so little guy. Yeah. He's been into all kinds of shit this morning. Yes, he has. Yeah, he's a good cat, though. He might be the best cat I've ever had. I'll tell you what other cat would ride over 4,000 miles in a car with me? I'll tell you, the answer to that is none. I never had a cat who would even get in the car without a major flip out. I'm talking, in a carrier going to the vet half a mile down the street. Anyway, let's see, I've got my coffee. Hang on here. There he goes. Oh, there he goes. Up the tower. It's been a while since I've done a 1982 update. So we're going to do that here now. I didn't speak much the other day about the road trip. Okay, that was... I probably have before, but I left on September 26th, got back home on October 21st. Spent 2 weeks in Aliso Viejo, California, house sitting. The rest of the time I was on the road. It took me 5 days to get down there. There was a detour. I wanted to see the Highway 1 in Big Sur. Of course, the road was closed just below McQuay Falls, so I went down as far as I could. Then I had to double back and ended up in Morro Bay. So that was a whole day from just above Monterey in a little town called Marina. Did the Big Sur thing and back. Normally I could have made it from Monterey to Aliso Viejo in one day. So a 4-day trip normally, I turned it into 5. And the same thing on the way back when my buddy Eric drove with me to Morro Bay. Spent 3 nights there, then he took the train back to Irvine, the Amtrak out of San Luis Obispo. And from there I took 4 days to drive back. I used to do that in 2. Anyway, back to the baseball. Okay, the 1982 replay, in case you don't know, it's a Windows game replay, and I like it because I can knock out a game in 10 to 15 minutes. So oftentimes I'm sitting around in the evening watching TV, I'm bored, make a cup of tea, I can grab my laptop, I can knock out 4 or 5, 6 games in an evening sitting there watching TV. I manage the home team always, so it's fair. Each team gets managed by me. 81 games, and by Hal 81 games. And the last time I did one of these, it was 8 weeks in the books. We've got 11 weeks in now. I just wrapped up, played quite a few games last night actually. I wanted to get it done so I could get this stat update out for you guys. Tomorrow I'll be visiting my mom, of course, and then later today we have a 1966 game. So that's where I'm at here on a gloomy Friday. It's about 42, foggy, cloudy, and I'm going to fire up the stats here. I've got them up actually. So I'm going to move the camera over now, and we will look at the we'll look at the stats. I got to see what Mookie's doing. All right. Get this in position, see what I have to do to line it up right. So you got that. We need to be there. We need to be zoomed in a little better. All right, that looks pretty good. Let me see what he's doing here. Hey, I found my base runner peg. It wasn't there before. I can assume that he tried to eat it. I ordered some more of those. Yeah, since I was ordering a new fielding chart anyway, or ordered another bag of dice and another rule book and something else, I think. An extra 20-sided maybe. You can never have too many dice or pegs, right? And let's take a look now here at the chat. See what we've got in the chat. Looks like nobody watching right now, and that's cool. It says one watching. Anyway, I find most people watch the stat update later anyway. So let's start it off here. 1982 American League. Here's the standings. Each team's played about, 65 games roughly, 64 to 66. And we've got a dogfight in the AL East. Red Sox a half a game up on the Brewers. The Blue Jays just 2 back. Cleveland and New York very much in the race, 4.5 and 5.5 back. Orioles hovering around 500, 8.5 back, and the Tigers 11 back. In the West, Kansas City Royals leading the White Sox by 3.5. The rather disappointing Angels, who won the division in real life, 31 and 35 so far, 7.5 back. Well, they're not out of it by any means. There's a lot of baseball yet to be played here. Then we find the Mariners and the Twins, 29 and 39. The A's 24 and 34, and the Texas Rangers 20 and 39. Even worse than their real life record. Another fun thing to look at is, I meant to do this on the 1966 actually, to look at the run differentials. The American League is quite interesting in that only 4 teams have a negative run differential. Boston with a plus 56 is the highest. Cleveland and Kansas City plus 45 Toronto, 44 Cleveland, 43 Kansas City, 35 Milwaukee. Let's look at the first grand totals. Red Sox leading in batting. That was a hitting ball club, not a surprise. Angels are hitting well, 279. And they're second in the league in home runs with 77. The Twins have hit the most, 83 home runs. Let me slide this down a little bit so I can see all of the pitching, hopefully. You can almost see it all. League ERA is 4 exactly, okay? So you've got the Twins. They've scored 320 runs, okay? That would be 1, 2, 3. They're 4th in runs scored, but their pitching is horrible, 5.36 ERA. And that pretty much explains why they're where they're at. Leading in runs scored. The Red Sox are second, actually. The Angels lead the league in runs. No, they don't. I take that back. They've got 330. The Cleveland Indians lead the league in runs scored, 335. The Angels, 330. The Red Sox, 326. California's problem has been pitching, 4.27. The Yankees lead the league in team ERA, 3.37. Brewers, Royals, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Orioles, Rangers. You've got the Mariners and the White Sox pretty close to the league average, and then the drop-off. So the Angels' underachievement so far can be attributed almost entirely to pitching, as can the woeful play of the Tigers, A's, and Twins. Let's jump over to the National League. We'll look at the standings. Oops, I don't want league leaders yet. Here we go. We find the Cardinals leading the East, the Dodgers leading the West. Cardinals 3.5 ahead of the Pirates. The Expos, good club that year. They're hanging in there, 32-30, just 6 games out. Phillies hovering around 500, 7.5 games out. And the Cubs and the Mets pretty much battling it out for last. Dodgers lead the Braves by 2.5. The Braves won that division by 1 game in real life, remember. Padres hovering around 500. Not out of it. They're 8 back. A lot of ball to be played. Giants have really underachieved. Again, they're underachieving in my 66 replay as well. 31-36 in 1982 so far. They finished 3rd in real life, just 2 games back. That was one reason I picked this year to play. In fact, there were a lot of close races. There were a lot of teams that were in it to the very end, which could make for some interesting results. I'm not one of those replay guys. I tell you what, if I did a replay and everything, all the standings and the numbers lined up to what they were in real life, I'd be disappointed. I know some people go for that. I frankly don't see the point. That's just me. Yes, use the actual starters and lineups, but then let's shake it up and see what might have happened. To me, that's the fun of it. Reds and Astros, of course. I don't hold out much hope for the Astros or the Mets. The Reds are actually, well, not by much. Instead, they're outplaying their real-life record to this point. Yes, by 1 game. The Astros underplaying by 1 game. The Dodgers have overachieved at this point by 6 games. The Braves underachieved by 2. The Padres have underachieved by 4. Over here, the Cardinals have overachieved by 2. Pirates have overachieved by 6. The Expos underachieved by 3. The Phillies underachieved by 2. So that's kind of interesting. Let's check the first grand totals in the National League. We find the Cubs atop the league in team batting, followed by the Pirates, Phillies, Reds, Dodgers, Expos. Braves 263, 282 runs. The Braves, to me, should be hitting better than this. Let's look at runs scored. Cubs lead the league in runs scored, 322. Then it's the Pirates, 316. The Dodgers, 313. The Cardinals, 312. The Braves at 282 have been outscored by 6 teams and are tied with the Expos. Expos were a good hitting team too, though. In real life, I mean, that year. So you have to kind of think both the Expos and the Braves will hit a little better from this point on. Giants just aren't hitting. Who's really not hitting is the Houston Astros. Look at that, 210 runs. The next lowest total is 223 for the Padres. Dodgers leading in team ERA. Let's slide this down a little bit. The league average in the National League, of course, a little lower, 3.77, and that's to be expected because at this point in time, the American League had the DH and the National League did not. Los Angeles 3.08, San Diego 3.13, the Expos 3.3, St. Louis 3.45, the Astros 3.69, Then you have the Braves, Phillies, and Giants are all right around the league average in ERA. And then there's the drop-off, Pirates, Mets, Cubs, and the Reds pitching has just been horrendous. The Reds were the worst team in the league in real life that year. So hopping back over to the AL, wait a minute, let's go back to something else here quickly. I didn't do this for the National League. And that is the run differential. Now, the National League, you have 6 teams above, 6 teams with a positive run differential, 6 teams with a negative run differential, which intuitively you kind of think that makes more sense. It doesn't always work that way, of course. Dodgers at a plus 84 have just been playing fantastically. And then you have St. Louis at plus 50, and they've been the 2 best teams. The Pirates at 39, Expos at 37, Phillies at 25. Teams that should be contending. Atlanta, well, they're positive, but just plus 3, and the Giants are very disappointing, minus 46 in run differential. But I remember this year well, of course, from my youth, and the Dodgers had a hell of a team this year. For me, as a Dodger fan, I had a hard time accepting that they couldn't win that division at the time. I mean, I'm replaying it. Oh, my goodness. I'll tell you what, that pitching and that bullpen, playing the games when I'm managing that team, there is not a bad choice out there in the bullpen. They've got like 5 or 6 guys in the pen with really good cards. St. Louis, of course, has Bruce Sutter. St. Louis plays great defense. They can hit. St. Louis, the most well-rounded team, I would say. You've got great defense everywhere, good pitching, and you've got Bruce Sutter. Let's take a look at the league leaders now. Before that, I went, oh, hello, Kelly Hibbs, welcome. Before I get into the individual numbers, just a reminder, I will have a 1966 game coming up in about 2 hours and 15 minutes. That will be the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Sandy Koufax pitching for the Dodgers today against Don Cardwell for the Pirates. So please join me for that. These stat things I do just to, I think it's fun to look at the numbers. And it's also something you don't necessarily have to watch live, you know what I mean? You can come back anytime and look at these and take your time. Look at all the leaders. I only go over usually the top 5 in each category. So let's start off with American League batting. We find Damaso Garcia leading the league and hitting at 346. That's kind of a surprise. As is Rich Dower at 333. Tom Paciorek, Willie Upshaw, Toby Harrah, Cecil Cooper rounding out the top 5. There's Rod Carew, 327. You'd expect to see him up there. Greg Luzinski, Glenn Wright, John Wathan, Kirk Gibson, and Lou Whitaker rounding out the remainder of the leaders there. And runs scored is Toby Harrah of Cleveland with 59. Harrah, if you guys remember this era, you probably do. If. Of course you do. Toby Harrah was a walking machine, and he had some pop. In other words, Harrah could get on base, so not all that surprising to see him at the top in runs scored. Dewey Evans in second, Ricky Henderson. This was a big stolen base year for Ricky. And we'll get to that in a moment. Don't let me get by the stolen bases. Damaso Garcia and John Wathan round out the top 5 in runs scored. There's Molitor. Great leadoff man for Milwaukee. Thornton, and then you have 4 California Angels, Lynn, Downing, Carew, and Jackson. That was a formidable offense indeed. That doesn't even include Doug DeCinces at third. And I know I'm leaving somebody out. My mind's a blank here. Garcia way out in front in hits with 97. Willie Upshaw, Toby Harrah, Cecil Cooper, Rich Dower rounding out the top 5. In doubles, Damaso Garcia once again leads in doubles with 23. Garcia leading in batting average, hits, and in doubles. Younton Lazinski with 21. Fred Lynn and Al Cowens of Seattle at this point. I remember Cowens more, of course, with the Royals, but he was with Seattle that year, 19 in doubles. Larry Herndon of Detroit has 9 triples. Hal McRae was always good for hitting triples, wasn't he? He's got 7. Cal Ripken and Bill Allman with 5, and then we have quite a few players with 4 triples. Let's get to the money stats here. Home runs, we find Toby Harrah leading the league in home runs with 22. Harrah, of course, was with Cleveland that year. Reggie Jackson has 19, Jim Rice 17, Cecil Cooper 16. Kent Urbeck and Andre Thornton with 14 round out the top 5. And then we have Thomas, Nettles, Upshaw, Baines, and Parrish with 13 apiece. In RBIs, Cecil Cooper leads the way with 55, Andre Thornton 52, Jim Rice 48, Harrah 47, Ken Singleton of the Orioles 45, Willie Upshaw and Steve Kemp also 45. Look at the walks column. My goodness, Ricky Henderson way out in front with 72 walks. Let's see where the walking machine Harrah ranks. Well, he makes the list, but he's down there at the bottom, 31. Wow. Less than half of what Henderson's drawn. Henderson's teammate Dwayne Murphy, second in walks. Evans, Thornton, Bruce Bhakti of the Mariners. Bhakti's received 9 intentional walks. More intentional walks in the Windows replay than in my 66 replay, since Hal's managing half the games. Hal is very, how can I put it? Hal likes to issue more intentional walks than I do, basically. It's a simple explanation. Hal also very clutch sensitive. There's strikeouts, hit by pitch. I'll leave those up for a little bit. You can look at them at you can pause this always, of course, and look at it at your leisure. Sacrifice hits. No pitchers in the American League. So unlike the 66 replay, these are all hitters. Rich Dower with Baltimore has 12. Tony Bernazard of the White Sox, 11. Jerry Remy of Boston, longtime color man in the booth for Boston after he retired. He has 10 sacrifice hits. Several players with 8. Stolen bases. Now, we were talking about this just yesterday, I think. Bill Ivamy, I think, asked the question, do you find you have a higher stolen base percentage in the replay? And I said yes, because we tend to try to go when the odds are more in our favor. And also, we'll run for the sake of the steal. In other words, it may not be game situational, but if you've got a 75-80% chance to try to take second, you're probably going to do it. Another viewer in the comments section asked me if I thought it was harder to get stolen bases in the replay, and I would say no to that. And I point to Ricky Henderson as the proof of that. We're just over halfway through the season. He has 76 stolen bases. And I believe this was the year, was this the year he broke the record? I want to say it was. Let's take a look here. I think it was. Yes, he had 116 in real life. Excuse me. There goes Mookie up to the tower again. So Henderson way out in front in stolen bases. Damaso Garcia second with 45, then it drops off. Wathan, Miguel Delaney, and Julio Cruz of the Mariners round out the top 5. Bobby Grich, the longest hitting streak so far. In slugging percentage, it is Toby Harrah leading the way at 639, Cecil Cooper 602, Jim Rice, 559. Kent Urbeck, 556. Fred Lynn at 551 rounds out the top 5. All the rest of these players over 500. Cowens, Thornton, Upshaw, Reggie Jackson, Lazinski, Dewey Evans, and Kirk Gibson. In on-base percentage, it's Thornton at 426, Dewey Evans 419, Carew 415, Hara 412, Gary Renicky of the Orioles 404. Dwayne Murphy at 401 just misses the top 5. OPS, it's Hara, Cooper, Thornton, Lynn, and Dwight Evans. Total bases, Hara leads there, 161. Cecil Cooper second with 150. Willie Upshaw, Al Cowens, Doug DeCinces, and Jim Rice round out the top 5. Lefty-righty, I'll skip over that. One thing we do have in 82, with being a Windows replay, that I do not have in my card and dice replay are the leaders in X percentage. And let me tell you about that first. In order to be at the leader at the position, that has to be your primary position. So in other words, if you were, say, a third baseman, 3E18, and your second position was first base, 2E8, regardless of what your X percentage was at first base, you're not going to be listed among the leaders at first base. You're going to be automatically lumped in it with the third baseman. This, I believe, is a flaw in the stat keeping by Strat-O-Matic, but there's nothing you can do about it. Anyway, it's kind of fun to look at the X percentage, because that's really what defense is in Strat-O-Matic. Eddie Murray, flawless at first base. You know how hard that is to do? Damaso Garcia, he's a 1. Frank White's a 1. Doug Flynn's a 1. Buddy Bell, several-time Gold Glove winner, he's a 1 at third. DeCinces a 1. Hara is not, but he has a low error range. Robin Yount, 90% X charts at shortstop. Man, that's a shortstop. In the outfield, Gary Ward is not muffed a chance. Ricky Henderson, 962. Molitor leads in errors. Alfredo Griffin, Jerry Dubinsky, Bill Lawman, Ron LaFleur, Marty Castillo round out the top 5. Let's get down to the pitchers. Pitching leaders, Luis Leal and Dave Stieb, both teammates with Toronto with 10 wins. Mike Caldwell, Dennis Eckersley, and Len Barker with 8, and we have a handful of pitchers with 7 wins to this point. About 63 games played again, so we're a little over the not the halfway mark, we're a little over the 1/3 way mark. I said halfway earlier, that's not right. 54 games would be the 1/3 mark. Rick Langford of Oakland's lost 10, and I can tell you a lot of that is poor run support. That's a good card. Morris, Bannister, and Huff all with 9 losses. ERA, Jim Beattie of the Mariners leading the league. So Beattie's our cult hero story in this replay. Oh, it's a decent card, but you don't expect that. Dennis Eckersley. Dan Quisenberry, a relief pitcher. Quisenberry's worked a lot of innings to be able to make that list. Luis Leal, who was leading, he's fallen off a little bit, which you would kind of expect. Then you have Bob McClure in fifth place, 2.54. Then you have Vukovic, Dennis Leonard, Steve Trout, Dave Stieb, Len Barker, Dan Petrie, Dave Righetti round out the ERA leaders. Innings pitched. Games pitched. Quisenberry and Minnesota's Ron Davis have been in 30 games. That's almost half their team's games. Dave Stieb leads with 11 complete games. Teammate Luis Leal has 10. Both workhorses, to be sure, but I can't help but wonder if that's not partly a function of Toronto just not having a very good bullpen. Toronto leans heavily on their starters, and it shows. There's Jim Clancy, tied for third with 9 complete games. Rick Langford, a known workhorse, also with 9. In saves, it's Goose Gossage. That's a great card, too. 17 saves. Wow. Raleigh Fingers of the Brewers, 14. Bill Caudle of the Mariners, both nasty cards. Caudle, 13. Quisenberry with 10. Ron Davis and Salome Barojas. Remember him with the White Sox? Yeah. He's one of those players I'd forgotten about until I started doing the replay. Barojas. Anyway, he has 9 saves. Several guys have 7. Dennis Eckersley of Boston has thrown 3 shutouts. We have a handful of pitchers who've thrown 2. And then we'll go down to strikeouts, which I like to look at too. Floyd Bannister of the Mariners leading with 78, just ahead of Len Barker, 77. Moose Haas of Milwaukee, 76. Guidry and Righetti, Yankee teammates, at 75. And there's Beatty again with 70. No pitchers batting. Did I skip over that? So no, there it is. Pitchers batting, there's none. Hits per 9, Beatty, 5.22. And you've got Eckersley, Righetti, Barker, Sammy Stewart of Baltimore, and so on. Ks per 9, Righetti leading, Jim Beatty, Floyd Bannister, Mariner teammates, Brad Havens, and John Tudor of Boston rounding out the top 5. Another one I like is strikeout to walk. Moose Haas way in front, 6.91 to 1. Gaylord Perry, the old man at this point, pitching for the Mariners. Yeah, and I live in Washington. I had forgotten about Gaylord Perry pitching for the Mariners until I started doing this replay. Got my coffee here. Okay, let's jump over to the National League. And we'll look at the same things here. National League has catcher Bo Diaz of the Phillies, still leading the league and hitting at 360. Bull Durham at 351, Mike Schmidt at 344, Bill Buckner 343, surprisingly Bill Russell at 332. I can tell you that card is not that great. There's a shocker. Lonnie Smith, for some reason, he was always a favorite of mine. Just absolutely loved that guy. He's hitting 325. Joe Morgan, Bill Madlock, Dave Concepcion. This was in the later stages of Concepcion's career, but he's hitting 313 so far. Dale Berra, Tim Raines, and another aging veteran, Cesar Cedeno, now with the Reds, batting 309. Oh, what might have been for Cedeno, right? Boy, those first few years, he was about as good as anybody. And look at those numbers, and then keep in mind where he played. That Astrodome was a hitter's nightmare. In runs scored, we've got Al Oliver of Montreal leading with 48. Jason Thompson of the Pirates, 46. Steve Sachs and Andre Dawson with 45. And my good friend Keith Hernandez rounding out the top 5 with 44 runs scored. Matthew Schmidt and Sandberg all with 43. Bill Buckner's leading in hits with 96. Concepcion, Diaz, Durham, Garvey, and Sachs round out the top 5. In doubles, Steve Garvey's leading the league with 20 doubles. Ray Knight, 19. Knight was with the Astros that year. Dale Berra, Gary Maddox, Pedro Guerrero, Terry Kennedy, and John Stearns, the catcher for the Mets, with 18. Who remembers John Stearns? I used to use him in a keeper league. He was one of the few catchers who could steal a base. That's what I mostly remember him for anyway. In triples, Omar Moreno and Tim Raines leading with 5. That comes as no surprise. Then you've got a handful of players with 4 triples. I'll keep that so you can look at it a little bit longer as we go down here to the money stats, as I call them. Home runs and RBIs.
Mike Schmidt, not surprising, 20 home runs, leads the league. Bob Horner, Pedro Guerrero is 16. Bo Diaz, 15. George Hendrick rounds out the top 5 with 13. Then you have Dale Murphy, Leon Durham, Ron Say, and Chili Davis of the Giants with 10 home runs. Others tied with 9. So Murphy would appear to be underachieving. That was a great card, that 82 Murphy. Let's take a look at it for a minute. Let's take a look at that under Atlanta. Real life, 281, 36 home runs, 109 RBIs, 4L balance, so that would give you a card that looks like that. 1 E9 with a -3 arm in all 3 outfield positions. Star Stealer, 3 through 6 with a 16, 1 to 15 runner. Better power against lefties, but solid power against righties. Yeah, I can't help feel that Murphy, as we go along, will start to hit more home runs. In RBIs, it's Bo Diaz of the Phillies, 54. We've got Guerrero at 49. Schmidt and Bull Durham at 47. Bill Buckner's in 5th with 46. Jason Thompson leads in walks, slight edge over Jack Clark and Lonnie Smith. Keith Hernandez, 45, and Mike Schmidt, 5th with 38. With intentional walks, it's been Lonnie Smith by far, with 15 intentional walks for Lonnie Smith. That comes as a surprise to even me. Those must be mostly Hal intentional walks. You guys know me, I would never walk anybody intentionally that much. Of course, it largely depends, too, who's coming up after. Phil Garner and Mookie Wilson have been walked a dozen times, and neither of them power hitters. I just wonder, let's take a look at Mookie Wilson's card for a second here. I'm guessing these guys go up in the clutch. Okay, there's a +3 in the clutch. Against lefties, same thing. Ever looked at the bar charts on these? Check this out. Okay, there's your lefty-righty bar chart. Black is all other outs. The gray area are ground ball A's. The light gray is strikeouts. The yellow is hit by pitch. The green is walks. The turquoise blue is singles. The dark blue double. The purple triple, and the red is home runs. And then this shows on-base percentages, lefty-righty, and slugging, 32.7%. of 108 chances on the card, okay? So this is a quick way to look at it. I sometimes refer to these when I'm looking for a reliever in my 66 set to bring in, for example. But the point being, Mookie Wilson, on looking at the card, doesn't look like a guy who would be walked intentionally 12 times to this point, does it? At this pace, he's going to draw like 30 intentional walks. Strikeouts, Chili Davis, Foster. There's Dave Kingman. I was looking for that. Boy, he was always good for it, wasn't he? I'm almost surprised he's not leading in strikeouts. The classic Castle or Outhouse man. Hit by pitch, Lonnie Smith again, 7. Sacrifice hits, Soto, the pitcher, 60. There's Glenn Hubbard, though, a second baseman in there with all these pitchers. Oster is a position player, the Cincinnati second baseman. And the rest of them are all pitchers. In stolen bases, Omar Moreno, a slight lead with 30, but Lonnie Smith, Tim Raines, and Bump Wills right on his tail, all with 29 steals. Andre Dawson with 26 rounds out the top 5. Mookie Wilson just misses. So nobody near the stolen base show that Ricky Henderson is putting on in the American League. Hitting streak, Andre Dawson has a 23. There's the asterisk. Jim Wolford has a current 16-game streak going. Slugging and on base, Mike Schmidt way ahead in slugging with an awesome 733. Bo Diaz in second, 623. Bull Durham, 586. Pedro Guerrero, 550. Joe Morgan rounds out the top five at 548. In on base, Mike Schmidt, 462. Lonnie Smith in second, 450 on base. Leon Durham, 439. Joe Morgan, 433. Jason Thompson, 432. And then you've got Bo Diaz and Jack Clark, also over 400. Again, Bill Russell does not belong there. He's just... That's a long time. It's still small sample size, okay, regardless. 162 games is a relatively small sample size. Let me digress for a moment. I read an article once about standard deviation and Strat-O-Matic, okay? To get the numbers to come out within the first level of standard deviation, you would have to play 10 replays and average them. Okay, instead of 162 games, 1,620 games per team. Then you average that. Now you're within 1 point of standard deviation. I don't know the math. I can't say I fully understand it. But the point being, 64 games, like I say, you still have Bill Russell. Let's look at that card for a minute. This is not a good card, okay? I don't know how he's doing it. He hit 274 that year in real life. He's batting 332, for God's sakes. Let's go to this chart. The on base is actually good. My God, he learned how to walk that year. Look at that. Hang on, let me slide this up. 497 at bats, 63 walks. I can tell you in his younger day, he disdained the walk almost as much as Garvey did. But his on-base numbers are solid. But not a lot, there's not that many hits there to be hitting 332. There's your hit by, okay, there's outs, black and gray. There's hit by pitch and walk, represented by yellow and green. There's his hits. He doesn't have that many hits on his card. Anyway, moving on. OPS, Mike Schmidt, of course, leading, way ahead at 1195. Bo Diaz and Leon Durham, both over 1,000. Joe Morgan and Jason Thompson round out the top five. X percentage, Garvey leading at first base. Nobody's close to Eddie Murray. Manny Trio's a 1. He leads at second base. Oberkfeld's a 2 with a low E at third, as is Sandberg. Schmidt's a 1, but with a higher E. Okay, so you can see how that plays out there. Shortstop, well, what would you expect? The Cardinals have the best shortstop in 1982. It's not even close. Gets on base, steals, 1E16. Brett Butler has not missed an X chance. That's really hard to do. It's harder at first base. Actually, Butler's in center, so no, it's harder in center. Butler hasn't played full-time, though. I can tell you that. Okay, I think this was probably his first year. Let's look at that. Yeah, in real life, he only had 240 at-bats that year and hit 217. So he was just getting started at this point. But he was a 1 in center. Johnny LeMaster has made the most errors. I'll leave those things up there. We'll dive into the pitching numbers a little bit here. Mario Soto and Fernando Valenzuela, 10-game winners. Then Rick Rhoden, Steve Carlton, Jerry Royce, Tim Lawler, Bob Forsch, and Scott Sanderson, all with 9 wins. Don Sutton was in the later stages of his career by 1982. Remember, Sutton was a rookie in 66, my card and dice replay. So this is 16 years later. Managed to win 8 games for a rather poor Houston team that year. Dick Ruthven leads in losses with 10. Seaver, Necro, that's Joe Necro, and Fergie Jenkins with 9 losses. In ERA, Bill Lasky of the Giants leading at 1.77. There's another surprising entry. Scott Sanderson, Charlie Lee, Fernando Valenzuela, Tim Lawler round out the top 5. All the rest of the leaders under 3, Forsh, Andujar, Nolan Ryan, also in the later stages of his career. Of course, he pitched forever, didn't he? This is more like the middle stages of his career. 2.68. Carlton, Monefusco, Joe Necro, and Jenkins rounding out the ERA leaders. You look at Jenkins' ERA. Jenkins, of course, another favorite of mine. Not difficult to surmise how he's lost 9 games, is it? He's not getting any support. And hello to Michael, Jeffrey, and Mike Terranova. We've got a few more people watching now. Games pitched, games started. Complete games, it's Steve Carlton. That's not that surprising at all to me. 9 complete games for lefty. Soto, Royce, Lawler, and Sutton all with 7. Valenzuela and Jenkins with 6. Necro 5, and several pitchers have 4. In saves, who would you think? Bruce Sutter, 16 saves. Sutter and Gossage leading their leagues in saves. Steve Howe, a dozen. Kent Tekulve and Greg Minton with 11, and Gene Garber of the Braves rounds out the top 5 with 10. Scurry, Tekulve, Ron Reed of the Phillies, and Luis De Leon of the Padres have yet to blow one. That's kind of amazing. Carlton and Don Sutton have each hurled 3 shutouts. Handful of pitchers have 2. In strikeouts, Carlton way ahead at 134. Mario Soto, 120. That's not surprising. Ryan at 102. So the top 3, not at all surprising. Valenzuela and Bob Welch, Dodger teammates, in 4 and 5. And then Kruko and Sutton, 77. Pitchers batting, I don't put a lot of stock in that. Strikeouts per 9 I like to look at. Carlton, 983 leading. Soto, 947. Ryan, 983. Candelaria, 8. Again, none of these come as any surprise. Mike Kruko of the Phillies, 5th. 7.19 Ks per 9. And we'll go down to strikeouts to walks. Carlton leading by a wide margin. Candelaria, Soto, Valenzuela, Sanderson, Gullickson round out the top 6. Michael Haynes remembers Johnny LeMaster. Yeah, I remember him too, of course. Let's see what he's done. Let's look at him since we're talking about him. Not much of a hitter, was he? 3E31. Somehow I remember him as a better fielder than that. What's about average, I guess, for that period of time. 216 in real life. He's hitting 244 in our replay so far. On base percentage, exactly the same. And he's slugging quite a bit higher in the replay. Mostly thanks to the 3 triples. He only had 1 triple in real life. He already has 3. So yeah, you can see a lot of anomalies can happen. Short sample size, even 64 games, a very short sample size. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this 82 stats update I'll be back in a little less than 2 hours with today's 1966 game. In the meantime, everybody take care, stay well, and I'll see you later on. Take care, everybody. So long for now.